Okay. Yeah, so we just heard a little bit from Steve on a couple of the issues he's got facing. You mentioned you're interested in looking at the stuff for the newest release, and I know Bywater has some demos. There's one, at least one next week, but I've talked to Bywater about sending somebody to our general meeting in February to also cover some stuff. So check out our general meeting in the first week of February. So that would be we switched things up. So that'll be February 7th. The general meeting and the board meeting have flip-flopped. So make sure that's on your calendars. But one of the things we're going to be trying to do with the general meeting is bring in not super long, but 10-15 minute like guest speakers just to give a little bit more draw to that meeting. So look forward to that. Other issues that people wanted to discuss.
Are all of you using Aspen?
Some.
Okay. It came up at one of our internal staff meetings yesterday that for Aspen users that are not on Koha, that are on other ILSs, they have user group meetings, and my staff feels we should have that. Even though we're on Koha, we should have Aspen user group meetings, or like support meetings. We report things in Aspen, and then we have every 2 weeks we have a meeting with our Koha customer service person. But even though she's wonderful and everything, she doesn't know much about Aspen. So I'm just wondering what the support would be for those of you who are on Aspen. We would like a meeting with Aspen people, even if it's just once a month, even though we're on Koha and the two are very closely together, but that we are having some issues in Aspen, which is normal, where we can't really speak to someone one-on-one or in a group at a Zoom meeting. So I don't know how other people feel about that.
I think a lot of libraries do meetings with somebody, a support person from Aspen.
For Aspen,
I know
okay.
we do. We used to meet a lot, and that was back because we were like the third person on Aspen, so the third group. So we were having like weekly meetings, but that was definitely overkill. So that's pared back quite a bit.
Yeah, we had a lot of meetings at the start, when we were getting set up and all that, but now we feel there's a bit of a void. So I didn't know whether that was normal or not, but my staff seemed to think that there was no ongoing customer support for Aspen in a meeting setting the way we have for Koha. So I can ask.
There's monthly meetings, Eileen.
Oh yeah,
There's
those
two
I
of
know.
them.
Yeah.
That's it. Those are the monthly meetings.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted an individual, you could certainly ask. I mean, all we do, is we cover basically tickets and what our priorities are. So it's usually a pretty quick meeting because if you keep your priorities up to date, then there's, they know what your priorities are. So it's a little different than how the Koha support is structured. But so those tend to be pretty quick meetings because there's just some different structures in how Aspen and even though it's the same, even though it's Bywater, there's just some differences in their approaches to support. So generally when we have a Koha meeting, it lasts longer because we're, doing more tickets that maybe nobody's looked at for a while. And at least my experiences on Aspen, tickets are a little bit less likely to be under a rock somewhere on the Aspen side. So but we do still have that meeting, and we just go over a few things, maybe ask a few questions.
Okay. Well, I guess all I can do is ask.
Is there any reason that koha-US doesn't have an Aspen users special interest group?
I mean, we could certainly look at doing that. It's, not that this is me deciding, no, we can't do that, but it is a different open source product. So we could do that under koha-US. I think it's certainly related enough that and there's certainly a lot of crossover, but that would be an argument, I guess, against that, is it's not a Koha thing, but it is Koha related, and obviously there's a lot of Koha and Aspen crossover, so that might be something to look at, but it would be helpful if there was a driving force for that wasn't me. So
Right.
If that's something someone wants to see, then finding somebody to lead this SIG would be a good first step.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there as an idea. If the
It's a good
Aspen
one.
people wanted to get together and talk in a less formal way than what they're doing now, where Bywater is there, then that would be an option. So.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for like the gatherings are definitely a bit more formal and driven by Bywater. They're a little less freewheeling, and there could be something to be said for just having a little bit more of an informal discussion about things that are going on. Even if somebody from the Aspen support team is sitting in, it's still just having that different structure could get some different discussions going.
One downside I'll suggest there is that, exactly what you just said, the community itself really hasn't gelled together yet. It's still kind of call it a fledgling community, a little duckling underneath Bywater's wing right now. And it does need to fly off on its own, if you will, but do we want to be the ones that are responsible for doing that shepherding, under the AG of the koha-US? And I would suggest maybe no, that you've got your own own things to worry about there. Not that it doesn't need to happen, but perhaps it ought to happen under a different flag.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're just going to ask, like we have the bi-weekly meetings with the Koha support person, that we have one once a month with an Aspen support person. I'm going to start there and see how it goes, because we have specific things we want to ask about, and you can put them in email and all that, and then you get an email back, but sometimes it's good to just talk it through with someone who's a support person with them. That's what I'm hearing from my staff.
I would say, as far as an Aspen community, it's been 9 years that we've been doing this, and that was the first meeting we had was like, the freewheeling. Well, Jason was there. It was, there was no agenda. There were not a lot of people. If Bywater hadn't brought every single one of their employees, there would have only been like 10 people in the room. So I don't think it would be the kind of thing that, based on my experience with koha-US over the past, 9 years, it's not the kind of thing that koha-US couldn't help, offer some resources to get an Aspen, more of an Aspen community going. And then maybe in 10 years, the Aspen will have its own, group of people. Because that was, 2014, that was Koha had been around for 14 years, and it had been used in the United States for about, 16. So having a formal users group organization just takes time. So, but starting off as a bunch of people in this group getting together on their own and talking wouldn't be a bad place to start.
So I did post a link in the chat, and that apparently there is I'm looking at January 16th, there's a community meeting. So there is something like that that already exists. Looks like that's bi-monthly. So that's one thing. The other thing I would point to is, because I think these things happen a lot, and that's certainly true of koha-US. In March in Colorado, there is an Aspen conference, and getting together and meeting people there are often how these things really foment and really get moving. Because like George said, we're, next year, which is a few days away, will be koha-US will be around for 10 years, and Aspen is much, much newer, and that's just koha-US. The Koha as a product available in the US has been around much longer than that. So it does take a while for these things to really get momentum.
Since there are a few people here, how many people are thinking of going to this conference? I'm thinking about it. Even though we're not using Aspen yet, it'll be sometime next year that we add Aspen.
One thing I would say is if you're not using Aspen, I have noticed there are increasingly more and more features in releases for the Koha OPAC that are Aspen-esque. So it could still give you ideas where how people are using Aspen might still, even if you're not going to be on it, could still inspire future developments and current opportunities that are increasingly being added to the Koha OPAC. But yeah, I'll definitely be there. I'm presenting.
I'd love to go, but I feel like we're still, we're probably all going to be wanting to stay closer to home because we're still in the midst of, let's say, settling in to Koha and Aspen. Although they could prove me wrong, could be that somebody from the office wants to go.
Yeah, you
But
should
I'm
ask,
going to
Steve.
see. I did, but I'm going to guess that I still want somebody there, so I think we might nominate one of the members of our consortium who's kind of very heavy into Aspen and send them along and see how that works out for us.
I joined the group late. What conference is this? Are you talking about?
Aspen Con.
This is AspenCon. I can surely find the link. Here we go. There's the link for the AspenCon. Again, not everybody has Aspen, but if you're considering it or just want to see how people are sprucing up and using patron-facing catalogs, still could be an interesting. And there is an online component too, Steve, so you could participate without going. But I do,
Yeah.
Obviously going in person, you get a little bit more value out of talking with other people and networking and all that.
I do have our consortium looking at it. We're actually getting some pricing for some of our libraries versus the whole consortium to see what that looks like. I've talked it up again. We initially looked at it, and I think because of our first attempt on EBSCO discovery, that being a failure, they were kind of burnt out at the time, but we've had some time go by, and I've given some valid reasons why we should look at it again. So it may be too soon for us to send anybody to the conference. I don't know. if we're not seriously considering doing it. I want us to. The thing that really is challenging right now is finding diverse or sites that have a lot of diversity in how Aspen looks. I mean, almost every site that I've looked at looks fairly similar, you know, out of the box look. So there's not a lot of people doing their own thing in there to
I could
really-
probably
to
send
really
you
amp
some
that up.
stuff.
What's that?
We're doing some different stuff, and I know there are other libraries that are too, but within our consortia, we have a few different setups, and some of these things do look similar, just because there is some basic structure around like how a browse category looks. But absolutely, email me, and I'd be happy to send you over some links of some different looks. And we're not using it to its full capacity either, because you definitely can do tons and tons of customization. Cool. All right. Any koha stuff that people are facing that they want to? We could talk more about Aspen. I don't mind talking about Aspen, but if there seemed to be a lull in the conversation, so.
I guess right now I'm just holding out till we upgrade. I'm not really doing anything new or exciting or interesting. I'm just kind of sitting back and cruising to the upgrade.
Yeah, I got our consortia will be upgrading late. We've got special dispensation since I will be out for a while, and Liz from Bywater was kind enough to not have my staff deal with an upgrade while I'm gone. So
We're wrestling
So-
right now with some notification issues. We're looking at some modifications, but one of the things that we've been struggling with is the AWS bounce notifications when messages aren't going through. The way that we have our email or had our email initially set up was that notices are going out as the individual branch email addresses where possible, and then the root email address when it's not associated with a specific library or item. But when we moved over to AWS to help control the flow of emails, notifications going out and to stop a lot of failures, we were not getting by default those bounce notifications that we rely on. And so they had worked something out for us to be able to confirm email addresses and then get a subscription to get those bounce notifications. And recently we've been struggling with those notifications getting turned off. Somebody unsubscribes to it somehow. What was going on by default is the return path was set to the same address, and so we have like a general circulation account that the notifications go out as, and so anything responded to would go back to that account, and we have somebody that checks that account daily and forwards messages to the appropriate people. But we think that maybe with so many hands in the mix, somebody accidentally keeps clicking the link and unsubscribing us. So I've been wrestling with that. And so now I have the return path. This took a little bit of work, but I have the return path pointing to my account so that I get those bounced messages, not have those bounce messages go to that general circulation account. So that's a new workflow. They don't have to deal with that mess. I get those messages directly, but what was a struggle with Bywater and setting that up is they were subscribing both the circulation account and me to those bounce messages, and I didn't want the circulation account getting those too. And when they canceled the subscription over on the circulation account, it canceled my subscription too. So it was really bizarre stuff. And what we ended up having to do is subscribing me, and it sent out an invitation to subscribe the circulation account. We just deleted that email so they didn't subscribe to it and didn't accidentally cancel mine. It's really, really bizarre. So that's one thing that we've been working with. And another aspect that we're toying with is changing the outgoing email address for all of our notifications to a single address that goes out, and then all the reply to addresses are the individual libraries. That way we have less points of failure for notifications getting blocked or marked as spam. You know, patrons don't have to be aware of different addresses that they have to watch for in notifications. So that's something that we're toying with, adjusting our system.
Steve, sounds like you might be, that resonated with you.
Well, just some of what you were talking about just rings a bell. I get copied on a lot of things, but I don't necessarily understand them all, as Renee knows. So, but yeah, notifications has definitely been one of our problem areas since the start. Gotten better, I think is fair to say, but it's still work in progress.
It's definitely a challenge when you have a system for a consortium, and so those notifications are going out through something other than your own email system.
Right.
And you have to tie all that stuff together, and you
Yeah,
have to prove that it's authentic and valid and not necessarily spam or you know, some sort of hack. You know, you have to prove the relationships and make sure all those pieces are working throughout the whole process.
I'm trying to look through our tickets. I know Mike, our member services coordinator, has been, like Steve, I'm copied on the emails, and I remember seeing exactly what you're talking about recently in open tickets, but I don't have the details and I can't find it right now. But I believe that Mike is working on pretty much the same thing you are right now. So Mike from our organization.
We've had a few notifications go to patrons, or a few patrons, saying their hold was ready for pickup, but it was actually in transit, because I believe in Koha, it still says available, even though it's in transit. So I'm not sure, again, I'm copied on tickets, but I'm not sure if that has been resolved. But when the patron went to the library, the thing wasn't there for them. So it's really bad customer relations. But I think Michelle or maybe Brandon was saying it was because in transit doesn't show in transit, you know, which it should. That's our notification dilemma right now, our current one.
I was interested in what Matt said here about how they've
Yeah.
they're not using AWS, which has been fairly problematic for us, and going through something else that's working well.
Yeah, I have a SMTP relay server on site that just says you can come from, we host all of our own servers for Koha as well. But it sends, I say our Koha server has permissions to send to my SMTP relay server, and then that relays it back to Microsoft. This is how we did it back on Polaris before we moved to Koha, and now with Koha.
Yeah, I
And you
wonder
don't
if you
find yourself getting flagged as a spammer and having to deal with that all the time.
Never had a single complaint in 7 years.
Well,
I wonder
So-
if you have to have that set up where you have all your servers too, or if you could do that even if you're hosted.
I'm
So
assuming
Matt,
if
you're
you
not,
have,
you're self-posted, you're not dealing with a vendor?
no, Bywater is our vendor,
Oh.
but we already owned all of our own servers, and it was more expensive to have them hosted than use our current servers. Like we had them for a year before we went to Koha. So we said, we don't want to waste all of our servers that we just purchased.
I wonder if Bywater would be open to trying some of their newer customers with a different service other than AWS, and see if one works better than the other in their ability to support that and make things move smoothly. It would be nice to, since they're our vendor, we kind of went with what they were dictating that we needed to use, but it would be nice if they had an option, and if they knew the differences between the two and what works better, or between them.
And when they were telling me about their AWS, they could never explain to me how it worked, why it would work, why it would work better. They couldn't answer any of my questions, so I said, I want to use it. I want to use the same thing I've used since long before I was here. And so that's what I kept. And like inside Koha under system preferences are an admin, and then SMTP servers, I just have my server with my IP address, port number on it, and then under each library I can choose which SMTP server to use. And so, like I said, mine's internal, but it's just an IP address and a port. So if you had an SMTP server somewhere on site, and you can on your firewall port forward from your Koha IP address on this port to the SMTP relay, I don't know why that wouldn't work, even if you're hosted with Bywater. Even if you just did it on a test library or something, had a bookmobile or something you wanted to test with. I don't know why you couldn't. Because there's no authentication, no anything that I tried to set up the AWS with them, and they couldn't get it working. They said, oh, do this, and I did all of it, and they said, oh, you didn't do it. Like, well, I followed your instructions, so it's not working, do it my way. And now I have control over it all. I can see, log into my Office 365 admin. I can see every email that went out, why it failed. Now I can see all those logs. And Bywater, several times it said, oh, you blocked something, something that you did was incorrect. I go show them all the logs. It failed for whatever reason, or never got to me. And then they go look to, oh, actually Koha was broken here and we had to fix it. That's happened probably half a dozen times this year with notices. Because we have a lot of issues with the in transit notice as well, where it says, oh, the book is here, but it's not, it's in transit. And so we've been able to prove through our being able to have so much control over the email system that we could say this is what was sent out, this is when it was sent out, here's all the parameters behind it, which I don't know what you get in AWS, as I've never used that version of it, but I can say having the full control over the emails is something I like. And maybe it's because I was an Exchange guy and I'm a network guy, so I like those things, but having the full control that I can see everything and not just hoping that something's working was very nice.
You're already established too with Exchange, and that might be a piece of the puzzle there too. It could be a licensing or cost issue.
Well, with the libraries, we get it for free.
Hmm.
Because we're a public education entity. I've talked to my Microsoft reps. They said, yeah, you get as many email addresses and accounts as you want for free. So I think it says 100,000 is my limit in there, which I'm never gonna hit that limit. And I moved us over to Exchange in 2018. I think it was. I started in 2017, and they just had a local email provider that was doing it. And I moved them over to Exchange in 2018. And we sent out thousands of emails a day, but typically they said, Microsoft said, if you're sending out 50,000 or more a day, I think it was, that's when you might be blocked as spam. But prior to that, we don't send out a volume amount that would be considered spam. Yeah, and sure, maybe people have their own individual spam filters that blocks us, because if they might have it set, oh, if you're not on our whitelist, everyone goes to spam. Well, we can't control that. But otherwise, we've not had issues of us being marked as spam, just in general.
Yeah, I think what happened. I think what happens with AWS is sometimes stuff just never. It's not like it goes to a spam folder. It just gets completely screened out. And when that happens, we usually have done the step where we verified with AWS. So presumably that should work, but then we have to set up something more directly with that. But a lot of our libraries have no idea how to operate the back end of an email system. So
Sure.
when I give them the instructions, they usually just stop responding to me. So, and I'm assuming the problem does go away.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's interested in my setup, I'm happy to talk about it. Feel free to contact me or anything.
I look forward to your presentation at the next conference about how you do this.
Well, the nice part is it took me about 10 minutes to set up. Like I literally had to put in SMTP server, add it to the libraries on my server, allow that IP address or the relay. So it was quite simple and all that. Yes, I had the Exchange portion already set up, but if you have Exchange, it's a pretty simple thing to set up.
No, I mean, George is absolutely right. This would be an excellent, because there is that piece where you're talking about that takes 10 minutes, but there's also the how do you maintain your own email server and all that would probably require some more explanation and a little bit more time, but that would be an excellent. I think a lot of people would be very interested in that.
I would encourage you as well. I would love to see a presentation.
Well, I'm trying to remember which library you're from too.
I'm a Black Gold library. That's in California, Central Coast, California.
Oh, okay.
It's about halfway between LA and San Francisco.
Matt, what's your last name?
Duhon, D-U-H-O-N. I'll just throw my email in chat too, so everyone can see it.
One of the other challenges that we have with notifications is we have Roadrunner or TWC domain emails that automatically go to spam and or get blocked, and that's the hardest thing to communicate to staff to relay to the patrons. If if you've got a Roadrunner account or a TWC account, they need to communicate with them that you're automatically going to have problems because we get notifications that they get blocked. We've had but we've also been getting some false signals from some of those as well. I'll have some patrons say, we've been getting notifications, but we are getting bounce messages from their servers saying that they're bouncing. We have no choice. When we get those bounce messages, we have no choice but to treat it as if those emails are not going through. And, you know, we have to notify the patron. And what we do on our end is we block the patron so that, and, you know, with a message saying we're not getting messages through on this account. And so they have to keep dealing with that. And so we now have it set up to where if we block that, there's an explanation. This is a Roadrunner account or a TWC. We may be getting false, you know, information, but we have no choice but to respond to it each time. You may want to consider a different email address or, you know, text messages or phone instead of using this account for your notifications. So that's frustrating for the patron. It's frustrating for us, you know, especially, you know, if that domain is sending false information back to us.
Totally.
Do
I'll
you
just
get
mention.
any
Go ahead.
being from an Exchange server point of view, do you have any run-ins with Roadrunner accounts or TWC?
So we do a different reply to from the sending address. So each library can get their own reply to address. And some use some have a unique sending address, some have the same sending and reply. So I don't see those all the bounce backs. I just occasionally they'll ask me questions about things. I don't see every single one. Now I'm with the cooperative headquarters, so I don't work with Koha. I'm the network guy and the server guy. So
my understanding is those bounces don't necessarily go to the reply to, they go to the return path. So there's three different when you set up your branches, there's three different email paths that you have there. You have the outgoing address, and you have the reply to address, and you have a return path address. And I think those bounces go to that return
and
path.
those would all be to the library would get those, not myself.
Okay.
And they've asked me some questions when they've noticed something, and then I look into it and, oh, look, they have their email address spelled wrong or things like that. But I've not heard of anything with Roadrunner. And it could just be that we don't have, people don't have that really around here. I've never actually heard of that before.
Roadrunner and was a part of Time Warner Cable, and when they lost it's a long story, but
which is now Spectrum.
yeah,
we
it
don't
has
have
to do
Time
with
Warner
the
around
business. It has to do with business mergers, and they told these people they could have these Roadrunner email addresses for the rest of their life, and then they went out of business and got bought out. And the company that bought them out doesn't want them to have those anymore, and so they just keep making the service crappier and crappier and crappier, hoping these people will just give up on these crappy email addresses, and they don't. They want to keep them for the rest of their lives.
Got it. Thank you for that explanation. Yeah, we don't have Time Warner around here. We have Spectrum. And so that could be why I haven't heard much about them. But yeah, I haven't ran into that myself. I know I've ran into bad email addresses, wrong email addresses, stuff like that, where they say, oh, this doesn't exist in their system. I'm like, well, call the patron to find out, did they give it to you wrong or something? And that's what I find most of the time is they just mistyped or something like that.
That's why I keep pushing with the community. We need some sort of email verification outside of, if you're self-registering, you have that ability. But if you're not self-registering, if the staff is setting up your account, there's no way to, have the system, when you put in an email address, it doesn't verify that address in any way. It would be nice that if Koha, when it sees a new address in an account, it says it's unverified, it's working on it, it sent them an email or something, and if it's verified, it shows that, and then notifications go to verified accounts only.
I just put the bug in the chat box. There is a bug for require patrons to confirm email addresses before emails are sent.
I would like to see that mechanism for both email and for text messages, that Koha doesn't send a notification to any of these without it being verified and showing that in the system.
Yeah, there's
I
a
was
separate
gonna-
bug that says email and SMS verifications. I'll put it in the chat box. Sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to step on you.
No, no, you're good. I was just gonna mention that we are still also largely AWS, but we do have 3 branches set up as through the SMTP, through Google's SMTP, which has its own pros and cons, but the main pro is it's actually sending email from Koha using that address, so it doesn't look like spoofing, and the library can see the sent messages in their inbox as sent messages, and they get more meaningful bounces. And that's really easy to set up. We're just using free Gmail accounts because none of my libraries have like real Gmail accounts. But there's a blog about configuring that there. So, and it does work. Like if you want to test it with just one branch, you can set it up for just one branch and fiddle with it. The main struggle there is you do have to have 2-factor authentication turned on the Gmail account. And then I've run into multiple times where they've turned that off because they don't think they need it anymore, and that kills messaging completely. Or somebody's left the library and they're taking their phone with them, so they took off the 2FA and then it doesn't work anymore. So there are other, like I said, it's got pros and cons.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, Jason, is exactly what would happen if we set that up for some of our libraries.
Yeah, I bought one of these. What do you do with that? They make little keys, and I think that would work for us. It's like a USB key. So instead of using a phone for 2-factor, they plug in the USB. So like that would stay with the library, and they wouldn't have to change it ever. But I just haven't gotten around to testing that out and making it work.
Yeah, we got a cybersecurity grant, like a one-time grant, just this past year from our state, from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. And one part of it is we bought one of those gadgets for each library, but I'm not sure Brendan has got around to sending them out. But this will overcome, people who don't want to use their phone for the multi-factor authentication. They'll be able to use this, but I think he's working on that. Because it does tie in with it's hard to switch companies for cyber insurance. It's really hard, and they don't understand about consortia. So one of the questions on those insurance forms for cybersecurity is MFA. So we decided we had to do something about the Google stuff. So anyway, that's in progress here.
Just want to note, Rudy put his setup in the chat if everybody wants to look at that. I think we've done some SMTP stuff for some of our libraries that the AWS verification wasn't doing the trick, but we had Bywater send over instructions and then do the back end. But it looks like the back end's pretty easy to set up. From what Jason said, I think for those libraries that have done it, it has worked a lot better. But yeah, I don't have, the way we're set up, our consortium set up is I don't have access to their email servers and they don't often know how to do this, so I'm gonna review those instructions because I think they just need some help with how to. I don't know, the instructions that Bywater has given us are pretty straightforward. They just have a lot of terms that I think are scary looking. And so even though it's like step by step, I just think people don't want to get in there and mess with stuff.
Yeah, it's the whole app password thing that scares my library. It's like, they're nervous that I'm gaining access to their email account or something, I guess. But the app password's actually there to provide that level of security, so they're not having to share their actual password.
I will say that for my libraries, I have to send out as at blackgold.org, but the return to and return path can be their city or county email address domains. I ran into that where I had the sending email address had to be from my domain. So Bob, you're saying you don't have control over their domains. That's where from your domain you could send out as you or as your consortium and then return to the library themselves under a different domain.
Yeah, and that makes sense. We're just very loosely affiliated, so anything coming from me would make no sense to any of the patrons. So that would be
Gotcha.
an issue, but it's something we can look at. It wouldn't be the worst idea. Just to send something from a general email, but I think that the patrons generally like getting something from their branded library because the name of our consortium means absolutely nothing to them, but it is something we can look at doing for some libraries. It's a good idea. Well, we have a little bit less than 10 minutes left. I did want to bring something up, and that is some of you may be aware that I'll be on paternity leave in certainly the January meeting for this. But I was hoping I could get a volunteer to at minimum kind of run the January meeting. What that entails would be just sending out a reminder email. In the case of me, I didn't get to it. It's a short week. I didn't get to it until this very morning, but people still showed up. So sending out a reminder email and then just generally kind of keeping things somewhat on track in the meeting. So that's the ask. Long term, I think given that I have more duties being the president this year, it wouldn't be a bad idea to find a long-term person to run the SIG if somebody is interested in that. But if not, at least the short term, just that one meeting would be extremely helpful. I'm not going to put people on the spot necessarily, so you can just shoot me an email. I'll just give you that email, and you can let me know if you would volunteer to run the meeting. Otherwise, it could just be a situation where people just show up, and that probably could work too. It'll be it's on the calendar and all that, and that would be fine. But I will not be there. Anything else people want to discuss in the last few minutes before our time is up?
Oh, weird one for you all. Does so we just had, it's Aspen again, but I suppose the same thing could apply to you Koha libraries. So we recently had an incident with our site where it was all slowing down and again. And of course, our members are somewhat on the warpath at the moment still. So, everybody's getting their pitchforks out and sharpening them and looking for lighters to light their torches again. And, Bywater's on it and Bywater restores the site and they close the ticket. And I'm like, okay, what was it? What's going on? Why does this keep happening? Et cetera, et cetera. And I get a chat from Michael who says, "Oh, by the way, in case nobody told you, that was, a DOS attack on your site." Like, well, that would have been a piece of helpful information. It's not the first time that's happened. It would certainly help with the pitchfork sharpening because it would direct the evil doing to an outside entity. But I feel like, and Renee and I were talking about this the other day, like, I feel like, they're not attacking our site necessarily. I mean, their attack is on Bywater. We're hosted with Bywater, but we are the target, and this is kind of the nugget Renee and I were chewing on the other day, I was like, do we care? Should we care? Like, we can't do a damn thing about it because it's Bywater. They've got to, do their magical voodoo that they do to protect the site or whatever. But at the same token, I'm wondering, like, should we care? Should I be monitoring this? Should I be like, for example, hey, we got hit 10 times last year with an attack, and this year it was 20. Buckle up, people, because the trend is getting worse, or, we're in a silent period now, or I don't know. So I'm going to shut up and see if anybody has any thoughts on this.
Well, we haven't had that particular issue, but I mean, there's so many reasons why something could be slow temporarily.
Hmm.
I'm
more interested in the cybersecurity stuff. Like, do you want to know when your site is getting hacked?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I would say I would like that information, but you raise a good point about then what is actionable once I have that information. There's nothing really to be done. So it becomes more of a how you're communicating to the libraries that were affected more than anything else.
There are different aspects of koha that can cause slowness. Some of the things that we've run into in the past, I think they've improved on since then. But one of the things that we've run into early on was, when somebody was running a report that was just endless. Those runaway reports killed a lot of processes for koha, made it really slow, and so we had to limit who has access to writing and running reports, because if they don't know what they're doing, they could cause a little havoc there. But one of the other things that we had run into early on, and Bywater has some things in place to catch it and stop it, but we had a library that had one of their OPACs. The keyboard was wedged under the monitor and holding down a key, and was causing a lot of traffic on koha, and then Bywater cut off their address, blocked them, and they had to get their their library reinstated because all of that was coming from their IP address. But we had to figure out what was causing that. That was an odd scenario, but there are some things that can happen in the background. Can't say that relates to you, but there are some things that can happen just in normal operations.
Oh yeah, and we know we have slowness problems that are a result of other things. I'm not really talking about slowness issues though. I'm purely talking right now about cybersecurity incidents and what is our responsibility as the administrators of our institutions in a but still in a hosted environment with Bywater or somebody else. Like, what should we, can we, what's the coulda, woulda, shoulda of cybersecurity of these hosted sites?
I think
Yeah,
they
I
should
think
definitely, sorry, they should definitely let people know, because we're trying to emphasize cybersecurity to our libraries. So, and there's the attitude, oh, it could never happen to us. So I think, it's important that we're made aware by Bywater if there's an attack like that.
Yeah.
I had, there've recently been here in Kansas recently, the entire state court system's computer services were offline because of a ransomware attack. And we have had 3 libraries in our area, none of my libraries, but we've had 3 libraries in our area that have suffered ransomware attacks. And so occasionally I will get a director or 2 asking me, they'll read in the newspaper about these ransomware attacks, and they will ask me, what's going on with our security? How's our security? And I found that if you ask Bywater, what are you guys doing? I've had, the way I always phrase it is, I have a director that's asking this question, and it's been a couple of years since I've heard anything from you guys. What currently are you guys doing regularly to secure our data from ransomware attacks? And they always send back a nice statement that I can send off to these directors saying, this is what Bywater says they're doing.
So that bothers me because I asked for that not long ago, and that request was treated like, I've never heard of this before. It wasn't treated like it was a routine thing, which it really should be.
I wouldn't say that it was a routine thing. I've asked like 3 times for this in the time I've been here. I'm gonna see if I can figure out who I asked. That'll be in my closed tickets.
Yeah.
I've asked that before, and they've said
Yeah.
the same thing George described, where they sent back some like kind of a canned response at some point once they understood what I was asking.
Yeah.
Right.
Part of the issue too is, Bywater occasionally has people changing hands that
That's
handle
my
these-
guess.
These requests, and you might have gotten somebody new to this and they don't know offhand. So
Well, after
if
today, I'll
George
be
knows who
asking
that
for it.
is.
Yeah, I think we should all ask for it. So it's not something just out of the blue.
So I asked the question in November, and Elise picked up the ticket, and Evelyn was the one that responded. And she sent me a PDF that I was able to send off to the 2 directors that were asking about it. So I'd ask Evelyn. I'd say, can Evelyn answer this question? I hear she's good at it.
Michael did mention that he wanted to get Evelyn involved.
Yeah, in our conversation about the
Yeah.
cybersecurity, and they did get us something on the ticket, and the same people were involved that you just mentioned. But it's just that we all asked for it around the same time, and I just got the sense that it came out and like that, oh, I've never heard of a request like this before. It just seems a little off.
What
How
you're
did you
describing
phrase it,
is
George? Sorry.
it's how things are routed through their support, I think.
Maybe.
You definitely have different experiences with the route it takes. And if it goes directly to the person that needs to see it, you get a great answer. If it kind of gets shuffled through and somebody doesn't know who the right person is to talk to, and then they give it to the wrong person, that's kind of it's kind of a luck of the draw thing when you ask. Whether it's this issue or other ones, how that gets to the person that can answer your question is always kind of the
right.
It's either a long or a short journey.
That gets
So-
old after a while, though. I mean,
It gets old when you're paying.
yeah, exactly. So just you ask for
So what I specifically did is I said, I've asked this question a couple of times in the past. I gave them background, including the fact that the last time somebody answered this question for me, it was Larry in 2019. Larry doesn't work there anymore. And I said, Larry sent me a document outlining how Bywater Solution protects our data. Can someone send me a document outlining how Bywater Solutions currently protects our data so that I can share that with my library directors? So I
Believe it or-
specifically asked for
yeah.
a document that I could share
document.
with
Okay.
other staff people.
That has come actually from a couple of patrons at a couple of libraries asking about patron privacy. So at one time we were also required, the towns were requiring their libraries to ask about insurance at the various vendors. So nobody's asked for that for some time, but from each vendor like Overdrive and so on, we had to get, that was more like for insurance, but to do with privacy too, we had to get a statement from each of the vendors. And then I supplied those in a shared Google folder to the libraries. I have something completely off topic, and I don't expect an answer today, but maybe if you can connect me with whoever does authority work at your consortium. We load authority records from a vendor called Backstage, and Michelle, our member services manager, they've been loaded, but they're not linking with the bib records, the headings. So is any consortium representative here working with an outside authority vendor at all? Even Ocean State? No?
We use
We use
Backstage.
Backstage.
Okay, have you loaded authority records yet in Koha?
That's a Miranda question.
Miranda, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now we're struggling. I think we sent a bunch of remedial cataloging off to Backstage to do. And so we've got tens of thousands of records. And Jess is working on those, but that's really been languishing for months now, I think.
So is ours, and I'm getting annoyed at that because this is like a basic cataloging thing. If you work with an authority vendor, that when you load the authority records, like the official name of Stephen
The
Spohn,
problem is it's
that it
not
links.
it's
you
not
know?
a cataloging issue, although there are strain there as well. But actually, that's two areas where Bywater is definitely under-resourced, and that
Oh,
is
yeah.
cataloging, but also data.
Yeah, and
Their
acquisitions
data
too.
team is thin. And as far as I can tell, they've got their superstar there, Jess, who seems to be able to do everything and juggle, entire worlds in her hands while she's doing it. And then
Is this Jesse who is part of
Jess
the
Bino. No,
Jess
not
Bino?
Jesse.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're thin on the data
Yeah.
side. I would say the thing that we've done is talk to Michael Cusack and
Yeah.
just tell him, listen, I know we've got dozens of tickets open with you right now, and you guys are drowning in them. This is the one. If you do nothing else today, can you please knock out this ticket? And
Okay.
they appreciate that, at least some understanding that, yeah, we know that we buried you under a bunch of stuff,
Well, yeah, the other thing is training. They're really falling short on their promises about training too, ongoing training. So we escalated something with him about that, their education team. Training for our libraries, just online on CERC cataloging and so on. But the authority stuff on our old system, we were able to load it ourselves, and it linked very nicely with the bib records. I mean, there's no point in doing authority work otherwise. So I said to Michelle, I would ask, because we couldn't be the only people loading authority stuff.
Miranda.
So, anyway, thank you.
I just checked with Miranda and she said we haven't done anything with Backstage yet. So,
Oh, and
We don't have-
actually, I think the reason we haven't is because of the big record batch that we're trying to,
maybe.
that's what it is, because we don't want to load authorities and then load a bunch of, 100,000 old bib records in the system and foul it all up again.
Yeah,
If
Bob
I
mentions
remember.
Annika. She's great, but I mean, she's
Yeah,
totally overloaded.
yeah,
Jess
she's another
Bino.
one of the good
Okay.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this before, but we're just in experience in a place where Bywater has been doing rapid expansion,
yeah.
and there's just growing pains with that. And it's just, I think it's going to take a bit for them to figure out how much support staff they need. And I know they're doing some stuff behind the scenes to try to make, particularly on the Koha side, things a little bit more efficient. But I think that's going to be a slow process. And it will improve. I believe that, but I think
Yeah.
a lot of rapid growth leads to this.
And I
And
think
we've-
they
Yeah.
had the foresight that they needed new people, but I think that they guessed wrong about where they would need those people.
Could be.
And they hired a lot of frontliners, a lot of educators, that sort of thing.
Where are they?
I don't know. We don't bother with them too much.
Yeah, we don't use
but-
educators a whole lot.
No,
Either.
but the data is where we need them, and cataloging, and that's
Yeah,
we
we
feel
find
that a lot.
cataloging and acquisitions. Yeah, and I've said that to
Yeah,
what's his name? Nate
Michael.
and
Oh,
the other
Nate, yeah.
Jesse and Michael, that it's cataloging and acquisitions. We need people with expertise there.
The problem is finding people with that
Yeah.
skill set
Exactly.
who don't want to work in a library themselves and want to be teachers, and they're looking for unicorns.
Yeah, I understand that. It's
I
Wish
think
we could help them find
acquisitions
them.
acquisitions is a good example of something where the size of libraries that we're on weren't necessarily, it wasn't a deal breaker to not have a robust acquisition system. And now that's starting to change. So now that all of a sudden there's more of a need there,
Yeah.
where it wasn't that there weren't, I think, a ton of people using acquisitions in a complex way. But there is the acquisition SIG that you can certainly send people to, and they are driving a lot of the discussion and some development there. So I would recommend that because they may actually have as much, if not more, expertise in that group than in discussions that are happening in Bywater. I don't know, but I just know that there are really
yeah, I
active
think
groups.
with acquisitions, we wanted more than one library to do the invoicing part, the EDI, and then we discovered the plugin that we got from, I think Kyle, would only allow one SAN, and of course each library that purchases and gets electronic invoices has to have a unique SAN. So that was definitely geared to a single library. But I think one of our staff brought it to the acquisition SIG and people weren't using that component. So that's why I asked in a consortia setting, because there's more of a chance of somebody in a consortium using EDI and acquisitions where you need more than one library identifier. So it's all fun, but I'm sure it'll sort itself out.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, a lot of what you talk about is a lot of times there's features that work perfectly well but haven't been set up for consortia yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we've only, on the bright side, we've only been on this system not even a year yet. February 27th, I believe. And you're the same, Steve. probably.
Just 3 months after you, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've learned a hell of a lot in a year, but right now our libraries are at the point where, okay, they've got used to actually working on the new system, but they want stuff to work correctly. They want the full functionality that they had on the old system.
Well, we went long.
Thank you.
But good discussion. This is what I'm saying, when we don't need to have a lot of prep in the agenda. Usually we can talk just fine. So great seeing all you, and I will see you in sometime in February, probably.
Congratulations, by the way.
Congratulations.
Yeah, enjoy.
Do my balloons.